In the most remote corner of the outer sect of Qingyun Sect, a woodshed leaked wind from every side inside it. An American named Kevin stared at a half vat of murky water. In the water, a face with blonde hair and blue eyes stared back. A high-nosed bridge and deep-set eyes looked painfully out of place in this eastern cultivation world. 3 months had passed since he was thrown into this place. His body still could not sense the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. His meridians were sealed tight like solid stone. In a world where strength ruled, he was immortal with no cultivation. He was also the uncivilized barbarian everyone in the sect agreed to despise if outer sect elder Qingxuan had not softened for a moment and taken him, and he would have been food for the spirit beasts in the back mountain long ago. Today was the day the sect handed out the monthly allowance he could not cultivate, but one low-grade spirit stone could buy a month of dry rations in the mountain market town. Below it would spare him from chewing the hard buns the sect gave him in pity every day. Kevin pulled his washed-out gray robe tighter. He leaned into the cold wind and pushed open the woodshed door along the way. Disciples stepped aside when they saw him. Their eyes held no respect. They looked at him like a filthy thing that carried bad luck in their whispers. He heard ugly words like foreign devil and white-haired beast. Kevin had gone numb to it long ago. He kept his head down and took his place at the very end of the line for spirit stones. The line moved fast when it was his turn. The one handing them out was the outer sect steward disciple Zhao Chong. Zhao Chong was at Qi refining third layer. He loved nothing more than crushing the weak. When he saw the blonde young man before the table, his lazy face turned into a mocking grin. Kevin offered his identity wooden token with both hands. He spoke in stiff Chinese and said, "Outer sect disciple, Kevin is here to receive a spirit stone." Zhao Chong did not take the token. He looked Kevin up and down like he was watching a joke. Then he covered his nose and mouth in an exaggerated gesture. He shouted to the crowd and called them junior brothers. He asked, since when did Qingyun Sect change its rules? He asked, when could even uncivilized livestock come collect spirit stones? The moment he said it, laughter burst out all around. His lackeys pointed at Kevin without restraint. Kevin forced down the anger burning in his chest. He spoke in a low, hard voice and said the sect rules give every disciple a monthly allowance. Zhao Chong snorted. He pulled a clear, bright spirit stone from his po. Cha. He rolled it on his fingertips as if he were toying with a trinket. He said, rules are made for people. He said, a barbarian like you has no right to talk about rules. He said, if you want it so badly, then I will reward you. Zhao Chong swung his arm. The spirit stone traced an arc through the air. It dropped precisely into a foul-reeking manure pit. Not far away, filthy ripples spread across the surface. It was the manure pit the sect used to water. The spirit fields. The stench slammed into the nose and would not let go. Zhao Chong clapped his hands. He pointed at the pit with open contempt. He told Kevin to go pick it up. He said, only a place like that matched your status. The laughter around him stabbed his ears like sharpened needles. Kevin stared hard at the manure pit, where foul ripples still rolled. That low-grade spirit stone was not just a cultivation resource. It was his food for the next month. In a world that treated him like an outsider, dignity had already become a luxury. Only survival still mattered. He clenched his teeth and jumped in under the crowd's contempt. Cold, thick filth swallowed his chest in an instant. The sick stench slammed into his head, and he held his breath. His fingers groped through the cloudy bottom until they found a hard edge when Kevin crawled out drenched in yellow-brown sludge. The disciples around him recoiled like he carried a plague. He gripped the spirit stone that would never wash clean and started to leave. Zhao Chong stepped in front of him and blocked the path. A venomous smile hung on Zhao Chong's face as he pointed at the stains under Kevin's feet and shouted. He accused the bold barbarian of bringing filth onto the bank and staining the sacred grounds of the sect. Before the words could fade, black-clothed disciples from the law enforcement hall burst out like vultures catching the scent of blood. They gave Kevin no chance to explain. A heavy iron boot slammed into his back and ground him into mud, and sewage water agony flooded his body, and his ribs groaned under the weight. The lead enforcer grabbed Kevin's filthy hand with a snarl and pried his jaw open by force. He shoved the spirit stone mixed with feces straight into Kevin's mouth. The rough edge tore his throat, and the stench and choking nearly knocked him unconscious. Around him, laughter and curses rolled without restraint. As Kevin's awareness began to blur, an old figure stumbled into the crowd. Elder Qingxuan rushed in with hair and beard in disarray. The straight spine he once carried now looked bent and small. He saw his disciple being tortured, and his eyes split with rage. A blast of spiritual pressure from the enforcement elder hit him, and he spat blood on the spot to keep Kevin alive. This outer sect elder with no standing dropped to his knees. In public, he trembled as he pulled a jade box from his robes where he kept it close to his body. It held a life-saving spirit medicine he had saved for 100 years. He had meant it for breaking through a realm and buying more life. Deep night. came and the candle in the woodshed wavered. Kevin lay face down on a torn straw mat, while Elder Qingxuan wiped away filth and cleaned his wounds with warm water. The old man's hands were gentle as if he were tending something fragile, and precious ointment spread across the swollen bruised back and cool relief rolled through the pain. Kevin turned his head and saw the master's face as if it had aged 10 years in a single moment. Tears still clung at the corner of the old man's eyes, and Kevin's own tears slid down without a sound that night. He swore a venomous oath in his heart. The shame of today would be repaid 100 times over by morning. The outer sect of Qingyun Sect felt no pity for what happened last night. Instead, the place erupted like a pot over a fire. Rumors spread through the courtyards. Like a plague after one night, they fermented into something cold enough to make teeth. Clenched disciples insisted Elder Qingxuan did not offer his medicine willingly. They said the blonde barbarian Kevin had sticky hands. They said he stole the 100-year spirit medicine meant to extend his master life. They said he traded it to curry favor with an inner sect female. Disciple the rumor even claimed Qingxuan swallowed his tears and told everyone it was voluntary compensation. That one story lit the whole sect on fire. A useless waste was one thing, an ungrateful thief from inside the house was something they wanted. Gone at any cost, killing intent thickened in the air. Wherever Kevin walked, Kevin dragged his unhealed body toward the dining hall. Hunger burned through his belly until his stomach cramped. The moment he reached the serving window, the menial disciple slammed down the iron ladle. The harsh clang rang out, and the disciple stared at Kevin with open disgust. He jabbed a finger at Kevin's nose and shouted curses. He said the sect's spirit rice was for people. He said it was not for a beast that betrays his master and disgraces his ancestors. Diners all around turned their heads and stared like he was rotten meat. Someone even dumped leftovers at his feet on purpose. They told him to lick it up like a dog. Kevin clenched his fist until his nails cut into his palm. In the end, he did not speak a single word. He turned and walked away because he knew any defense would be useless against the mountain of prejudice. Since he still could not draw qi into the body, he set his sights on the scripture pavilion. If there was any method for a mortal to temper the flesh, it was his only road. He forced himself to the entrance and lifted his foot to cross the threshold. A fierce blast of wind struck his face. The pavilion attendant did not even raise his eyelids. A casual sweep of the sleeve threw Kevin several meters away. The attendant spat out one word and told him to get out. He declared the scripture pavilion was sacred sect ground. He declared barbarians and dogs were not allowed inside. Kevin slammed down on the hard stone steps. The wound on his back split open again. Blood soaked through the rough cloth on his body. Disciples passing by did not help. They burst into satisfied laughter, as if watching a dying stink bug. All of it was seen from a distant tower by the chief senior disciple Lai Ocean. The prodigy, hailed as the future of Qingyun Sect, stood with hands behind his back. His gaze was calm and cold like ice to him. Kevin was a stain the sect could never wash away. Last night, the law enforcement hall had been too gentle. They had actually let this freak crawl on and live to please a sect master who despised foreign races. Li Ocean decided he would not wait for a natural death. He summoned his trusted men and gave a few quiet orders. Public opinion had already shaped Kevin into an unforgivable criminal. Now all that remained was one reasonable accident. Then the herb thief could disappear from Qingyun Sect without leaving a single trace behind. A thunderous crash blew through the woodshed. The rotten door that barely held together exploded into splinters. Kevin was still drowning in fever and could not even fully wake up. A cold palm clamped around his throat. Like iron, his body was yanked off the bed in one brutal pull. The world spun as he choked and gasped. Faces blurred above him, with eyes full of disgust. Lai Ocean men stormed into the shack like they owned his life. They kicked aside broken boards and overturned the few things he had. One of them tore into the filthy bedding. With theatrical rage, he flipped a straw mat like he was hunting a monster. Then he froze and shouted as if he found proof. Sent by heaven. He held up a delicate jade box for everyone to see. Inside was the sect treasure. Everyone was desperate for Ninghan grass. The ocean did not let Kevin breathe or speak. A strand of spiritual power struck and sealed Kevin meridians. In an instant, Kevin's body went stiff and numb like a stiff and numb rope pulled tight. They dragged him out of the woodshed like a dead dog. They hauled him all the way to the sect grand hall. Broken stones chewed through his knees as he was pulled across the ground. Fresh blood smeared behind him in a long red line in the grand hall. The air felt heavy and cold. Elders sat above like stone statues. Disciples gathered below with faces full of certainty. Kevin was thrown down in the center, like a criminal on display. He forced his head up, blue eyes wide with terror and helplessness. His lips trembled as he tried to explain, but panic crushed his thoughts and his Chinese was already clumsy. Only shattered, strange sounds came out. He shook his head again and again. He tried to say he was wrong. He tried to say he did not do it. His throat scraped out a hoarse protest. But in this solemn hall his broken words sounded ridiculous, like an untrained beast howling. The eyes around him were colder than blades. No one looked doubtful. No one looked merciful. They looked at him like they were already staring at a corpse. Lai Ocean stepped forward with calm pride. He raised the jade box and presented it as evidence. His voice rang clear as he listed Kevin's faults. One by one he spoke of Kevin breaking rules. He spoke of Kevin talking back to senior brothers. He spoke as if this outcome was inevitable. Beside him, Zhao Chong swore an oath with a straight face. He claimed he personally saw Kevin sneaking near the herb garden. Last night he said the barbarian moved like a thief in the dark. High above them, the sect master watched with eyes like lightning. Disgust flickered across his face as he swept over that blonde hair in this cultivation world. It marked Kevin as a hated oddity. The sect master did not care to hear a barbarian who could not even speak clearly. In his mind, outsiders were never trustworthy. If Kevin dared steal a sect treasure, then death was not enough. The sect master threw his sleeve wide. A roar like thunder exploded through the hall. He declared the barbarian greedy. By nature, he declared the crime unforgivable. He ordered Kevin to be taken to the main square at once. He ordered extreme punishment to be carried out on the spot. He ordered it as a warning to everyone. A bitter wind howled across the main square. The sawtooth spirit blade meant for punishment glowed with a cold, deep blue light under the blazing noon sun. That light looked cruel and sharp. The disciple carrying out the sentence showed no emotion. A hint of pleasure flickered in his eyes as if he enjoyed slaughtering something he did not recognize as human. He snapped his wrist, and the blade cut open the flesh on Kevin's back. With perfect precision, he did not pause even once. Spiritual power wrapped the edge and scraped hard against the pale spine bone. Beneath, a grinding sound rang out that made teeth ache. It sounded like a dull knife sawing into wood. With every inch the blade forced forward, tiny chips of bone sprayed into the air. Kevin's scream tore through the silence of Qingyun Sect. His whole body convulsed without control. The blue in his eyes scattered under pain that went beyond anything a person could bear. Cold sweat mixed with blood and soaked together in an instant. It dyed the torture platform beneath him a deep red. The executioner did not stop. Every time he carved another slice, he threw a basin of ice-cold salt water onto the curled open wounds. The sting ripped Kevin back from the edge of blackout. It forced him to stay awake. It forced him to feel every moment of bone separating from flesh. Round after round his throat went raw. He could no longer scream words. Only a ragged wheeze spilled out like a broken bellows. The light in his eyes dimmed one breath at a time. Those clear blue eyes turned into nothing but hollow emptiness and dead silence. Disciples below watched the bloody scene without flinching. Some of them even looked excited. They whispered praise under their breath. They watched like they were witnessing a sacred rite that cleansed the sect of evil. The next strike was about to dig toward the most lethal bone at the shoulder. An old figure suddenly broke through the law enforcement hall blockade. Like a madman, Elder Qingxuan rushed in with hair loose and wild. He threw himself down on top of Kevin without hesitation. Kevin was already a mass of torn flesh and blood. The spiritual whip meant to shatter Kevin's slammed into Qingxuan back instead. The sound of skin splitting and flesh ripping carried clearly across the square. Qingxuan let out a muffled groan. Blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, but he held his disciple under him with all his strength. His hands trembled as he covered Kevin's ears. He refused to move even an inch on the high platform. The sect master tightened his brows. Impatience flashed through his eyes. His voice crashed down in a cold shout. He demanded to know if Qingxuan would defy the iron laws of the sect for a thief and a barbarian. Qingxuan lifted his head with shaking effort. Those cloudy old eyes were filled with grief and fierce resolve. He looked down at the boy. In his arms, Kevin was barely breathing, and his face was no longer even recognized. Hey, Bo. Pain twisted through Qingxuan's chest. Like a blade, he had taken this child as his disciple for him. That meant a bond like a father for life. This child was from another race, but he had never once carried a heart that harmed others. Qingxuan could not watch him die under such torture. Qingxuan roared that if the teaching was not strict, then the fault was the master's. He swore that if Kevin had guilt, then he would carry it all himself. He raised his right hand high. All eyes widened in shock. He slammed his palm down onto his own dantian. With full force, a heavy dull sound rang out inside his body. His cultivation shattered in an instant. The spiritual power he had built for a lifetime collapsed like a broken dam in that single breath. His face seemed to age by 10 years. He forced himself to hold on to one last thread of life. Blood pooled around him. On the stone, he dragged his body upright and faced the sect master. He slammed his forehead down again and again in a heavy kowtow. Each strike hit the stone with a deep sound that echoed across the square. He said he had already crippled his own cultivation. He begged the sect master to spare Kevin. He begged only for the sect master to leave him a dog's life. The sect master looked down at Qingxuan in the pool of blood. The last trace of mercy in his eyes turned into cold. Ruthlessness. Qingxuan had shattered his own foundation. Keeping that cripple alive did not matter. But the blood of this barbarian could never be allowed to stain the sacred ground of the sect. With a single order, 2 law enforcement hall disciples moved. They hauled up Kevin, who was already unconscious. They dragged him like a dead dog. Qingxuan screamed until his voice tore apart behind them. No one looked back. They ran straight for the back mountain forbidden. Ground's fallen god abyss was bottomless. Fierce winds raged there. Year-round it was the mass grave where Qingyun Sect disposed of traitors and useless trash. Anyone who entered faced near certain death at the edge. The stench of blood mixed with rot hit like a wall. The enforcers wore faces full of disgust. It was as if they were holding the source of a plague. One of them flicked his arm like he was tossing garbage. Kevin was thrown into the darkness that swallowed everything he dropped. In a violent plunge, his body slammed into rock that jutted from the cliff. He hit again and again. Like a rag doll, each impact came with the crisp sound of bones breaking. The body that was already shattered twisted into something worse. Blood sprayed through the air in a long screaming red trail. Time lost its meaning. Searing pain finally woke the last shred of Kevin awareness. All around him was pitch black. Only ghostly lights flickered in the distance. The air was thick with corpse stink and poisonous miasma. He realized he was lying on a mound made from countless rotting bodies. Under him, slick puss water and white bones smeared together. Every limb was broken. His spine felt like it had been ground into powder. Moving even one finger was a luxury he could not afford. But he was not dead. That strange stubborn vitality of a transmigrator kept him barely alive in this hell. Thirst burned his throat like hot coals. The instinct to survive crushed whatever dignity he had left. Kevin was like a low crawling maggot. He hooked a jaw that could still barely move against a corpse. He inched forward inside the piles of rotten flesh. His mouth brushed a half-rotted chunk of meat. Unknown venomous bugs crawled over it. His eyes held only a mad green light. He opened his mouth and bit down without hesitation. He swallowed it all. He swallowed pus, blood, and writhing grubs with it. In that instant, his old civilization and pride vanished. Only one thought remained, and hatred watered it. Live, crawl back to the human world. Tear those cultivators who sit above everyone into pieces. He did not know how long he crawled through the mountain of corpses and blood. At last, he dragged himself to a low hollow, where black water pooled. Beside that water, a massive humanoid skeleton stood like a pillar. A bleak, tyrannical pressure rolled off it. By the weak ghost light, he saw a broken stone stela beside the bones. Several ancient characters were carved into it like axe cuts. Primal body refinement art. Kevin locked his eyes on the few lines carved into the stone stele. A bloody, savage aura seemed to leak from every word. His blue eyes burned with a desperate all-in madness. He had no spirit roots to walk the immortal path. Then he would use his own body as the furnace. He would forge a primal overlord body that could crush the heavens. He dragged his ruined body toward the abyss floor, where the gale was most violent there. The invisible wind blades screamed day and night without rest. They were like 10,000 boning knives carving flesh from bone. He did not hesitate. He threw himself into that wind throat on purpose. In one breath, pain like 1,000 cuts swallowed his whole body. The skin that was already rotting tore open. Under the gale, blood poured out, and raw red muscle showed beneath. Black poisonous water splashed over him at the same time. White smoke rose with a sharp hiss from his wounds. The poison burned like boiling oil, frying living flesh. Yet it also stopped the wounds from rotting any further under the wind blades. And the poisoned water, he fainted again and again. He woke again and again inside that endless torture. Every time he woke, new skin grew over the torn places. The new skin lost its old pale fragility. It slowly took on a tough bronze metallic sheen. It looked like refined copper hammered 100 times. Torn skin was only the opening act. Ripped muscle and forged bone were the real hell. Kevin knew his bones had healed crooked after the fall. If he did not rebuild them, he would be crippled forever. He lifted a jagged stone without any expression. He smashed it down on his twisted lower leg with full force. A crisp crack rang out as the bone broke again. He did not even let out a muffled groan. He immediately ran the primal body refinement art he guided, that domineering earth xianxia, into the broken bone. He forced it to scour through the fractures and shattered pieces. In this sunless abyss, time stopped meaning anything. Kevin became like a machine that never grew tired. He used the terrifying gravity at the abyss floor to crush his bones again and again. Then he let the art rebuild them again and again. Each cycle made the bone denser and harder. It turned like fine iron hammered. Without end, his strength climbed in silence with every rebirth of pain. At last, one day, he forced himself upright. His whole body joints exploded with popping sounds like roasted beans. In that moment, his flesh body strength crushed foundation establishment, realm cultivators in those blue eyes. No trace of mortal fear remained, only the cold killing intent of a beast. stayed there. Deep at the bottom of the abyss, a black-scaled poison flood dragon corpse lay across broken boulders. The flood dragon was 3 jang long. The iron-hard head had been twisted off by raw force. Kevin stood naked beside the corpse, scalding blood. Chi steamed off the whole body. For 3 years, Kevin hunted venomous creatures in this dead land. In the end, Kevin tore the poison flood dragon apart with bare hands. Kevin bathed in the essence blood from the heart at last. The weak mortal blood inside Kevin was washed away completely now. Kevin stood 9 feet tall. Every muscle bulged like carved granite. The lines were rough and violent, and packed with explosive strength. Kevin looked like an ancient war god dragged back to life. Under the skin no longer flowed bright red blood, golden red, overlord blood heavy, as mercury coursed through the veins. This was the sign that the primal overlord body had taken its first true shape. That blonde hair once mocked as an omen now hung wild over the shoulders. In the dim abyss, it flashed with feral, dangerous light. Kevin lifted the head slowly. Blue eyes pierced through the layers of mist and locked onto the single seam of daylight. Far above 3 years of hiding, 3 years of hell now. It was time to settle the old debts. Kevin walked to the cliff that was almost straight up and down. Kevin did not draw on a trace of spiritual power. 5 fingers curved into claws and slammed into the black rock. A dull, wet sound thudded out. All 10 fingers sank into the cliff. Like it was soft tofu, arms surged. That huge body shot upward like a cannonball and kicked up a storm of air. Kevin did not need sword flight to cross this shape. Kevin would conquer it with the flesh body alone. Every time a hand bit into the stone, a shocking set of finger holes stayed behind. Gravel flew in every direction as the climb ripped upward. Kevin looked like a humanoid savage beast. Revenge burned like a roaring flame around every movement. When Kevin was about to break through the cloud layer, the nose suddenly caught a thick stench of blood. It was the smell of human blood. Right after that, a sky-shaking roar of killing surged into the ears. Screams rang out. Magical treasures detonated again and again. Blue eyes flared with a violent golden light. It was hunger for slaughter. It was also fear for the one and only Master Qingxuan. In the next breath, Kevin blew a crater into the cliff. The body turned into a golden red afterimage. Kevin burst out of fallen god abyss. Completely, Kevin flipped himself onto the cliff top and looked out. What he saw was not the peaceful, immortal, blessed land from before. Qingyun Sect had become a slaughter ground. The mountain gate had collapsed. Bodies of fellow disciples lay everywhere with heads and limbs scattered apart. Thick smoke rolled across the ruins. Blood ran so deep it looked like it could float wood. In the middle of that chaos, Bloodshot Sect disciples were still cutting people down ahead. Lyoshan wore the crimson robe of Bloodshot Sect. He grinned like a demon as he planted his boot on the face of an old man. That old man wore rags. Every meridian in his body was shattered. It was Kevin Master Qingxuan. Lyoshan pressed harder and ground Qingxuan's face into the stone. He lifted a cold, shining ghost head saber. High over his head, he threw his head back and laughed at the Bloodshot Sect men killing around him. He shouted that he would use the old man's blood as an offering. Qingxuan lay there with no strength left to resist. His eyes looked dull and empty. He waited for death to fall in that instant. A terrifying sonic boom tore through the sky above it. Sounded like a meteor ripping the air apart. Something fell with a world-breaking force. Lyoshan had no time to react. A crushing wind slammed down on his head. His breathing stopped in a single beat. He tried to swing the saber at the shadow dropping from the heavens, but a vast, unstoppable power had already arrived. Kevin used no flashy arts at all. He fell from the height on raw gravity. Alone he hit the main square like a human cannonball. A massive boom shook the ground. Dust and smoke exploded outward. The hard blue stone floor cracked open. In an instant, shattered rock blasted in every direction like arrows. The shockwave threw Lyoshan back again, and again his saber was wrenched out of line. In the next blink, the blade was caught by a single hand. As the dust thinned, everyone sucked in a cold breath. A huge hand packed with calluses and thick veins gripped the edge of the ghost head saber. It held the blade still as if it were nothing. Kevin stood there with no expression. Those blue eyes burned. Those blue eyes burned with rage so thick it looked real. He clenched his 5 fingers. Golden red blood chi surged from his palm. A sharp crack rang out. The 100-fold refined steel ghost head saber snapped to pieces in his hand. Kevin lifted his head, and his presence crushed the square. In front of Qingxuan stood a returning war god of flesh, made holy. Lyoshan eyes bull, cheeked wide. His legs shook so hard he could barely stand. He stared at the giant, radiating terrifying ferocity. He could not believe the trash he threw into a manure pit could catch his blade with one hand. Lyoshan stared at that blazing blonde hair, and his pupils shrank hard. The memory of the figure curled in the mud overlapped with the killing god in front of him. Terror ripped out of him as he realized this was Kevin the barbarian trash. He once trampled Kevin gave him no time to breathe. The same hand that snapped the saber closed into a fist and drove forward. The force crushed the air into a visible shock ring. A heavy boom hit. Leoshan did not even have time to raise protective spiritual ki. His entire right arm exploded into a mist of blood-white bone, jutted out at the stump as shredded meat sprayed everywhere. The pain made Leoshan howl. Hell like a slaughtered pig. Kevin stayed expressionless as he seized Leoshan's throat from behind. Kevin lifted him into the air like a dead dog. With the other hand, Kevin ripped open Leoshan's blood-soaked robe. Several message jade slips engraved with the Bloodshot Sect mark clattered to the ground. Inside was iron proof of him selling out the mountain warding formation core. Inside was iron proof of him joining demonic cultivators and butchering fellow disciples. The surviving Qingyun Sect disciples erupted on the spot. The fear they once held for Leoshan flipped into raging hatred. Kevin's eyes were ice as he looked at Leoshan like a heap of rotten meat. Kevin's voice sank low, like it crawled out of the underworld. Back then you framed me for stealing medicine today. I give you the truth you deserve, but before that I will settle the debt of you stepping on my master face. Kevin's 5 fingers clamped down on Leoshan's shoulder blade like iron jaws. Kevin tore into him with a brutal twist. The crack was sharp enough to make teeth. Kevin was copying the bone-stripping torture of mortal butchers from finger joints to ribs, and then along the spine. Like a great dragon. Kevin's movements were precise and merciless. Every strike came with the sound of bone shattering into powder. It was like he was taking apart a broken doll piece by piece 1, 2, 3, all the way to 206 in only a few breaths. All 206 bones in Leoshan's body were crushed. He collapsed into a puddle of limp flesh. Only his eyeballs could still move. Regret and terror filled them until they overflowed. You insolent brat. A furious roar tore across the sky. Bloodshot Patriarch, who had been watching from the rear, could not hold back any longer. His carefully raised puppet had been ruined in front of his eyes. The core formation realm powerhouse released his full pressure. He formed seals with both hands. A towering blood sea surged behind him. Countless wronged souls and vengeful ghosts rode the corrosive blood water. It rolled over everything as it rushed to drown Kevin. This blood sea was the most sinister evil in the cultivation world. Even ordinary magical treasures would melt into pus. The moment they touched it, Kevin did not retreat. Kevin stepped forward, and a savage curve lifted at the corner of his mouth. The ground beneath his feet shattered. He shot forward like an arrow loosed from a bow and plunged straight into the blood sea. The corrosive blood water sizzled as it poured over his bronze-gleaming skin. It only raised a few wisps of white smoke. It could not break through the primal overlord body, forged by endless hammering Bloodshot. Patriarch watched Kevin break through the spell without a scratch, and panic split him open. He tried to summon his natal treasure for defense, but Kevin's massive head was already right in his face. Kevin used no fancy technique at all. Kevin locked both hands onto Bloodshot Patriarch's shoulders. Kevin drove his forehead forward, like a warhammer carrying mountain weight. The first impact shattered the protective golden light. Like glass, the second impact crushed the nose bridge and ruined the face beyond recognition. The third impact blew the core formation realm monster head apart, like a melon. Red and white sprayed out in a burst. The headless body twitched under its own momentum and collapsed. The entire field fell into dead silence. Only Kevin stood like a demon god in a pool of blood. Behind him lay 2 broken bodies. The fall of the headless body of Bloodshot Patriarch triggered a disaster after the limit-breaking battle. The primal overlord body of Kevin and the self-detonation power of a core formation realm cultivator shattered the sky. A black gash tore open across the heaven. Violent outer realm turbulence poured down in an instant. Where it passed, mountains, collapsed trees, and grass turned to ash. Qingyun Sect and the living things for 100 lie around faced annihilation. This was inter-realm chaos wind. Normal spiritual power could not block it. Only a body of extreme hardness and extreme pure yang could seal the breach in the sky. Kevin lifted his head and watched the crack widen without stopping. A decision formed in his heart. In a single beat he turned toward his master Qingshuan. In the ruins, Qingshuan was covered in blood and stood shaking among the dead. Kevin knelt down in front of him. Kevin bowed 3 times. Each strike of his forehead against the ground sounded clear even under the screaming wind. Chen seemed to sense what was coming. Qingshuan reached out with trembling hands to stop him. Fear and despair filled the old eyes. Kevin said nothing. Kevin gave a bleak, wounded smile. Then Kevin threw his head back and howled to the sky. The last thread of primal blood in his body that did not belong to this world ignited completely. Golden blood flame burst out through his skin. It wrapped him like a blazing sun. Even the savage chaos wind had to give ground and pull back. Kevin drove both feet into the earth. The ground caved into a deep pit in an instant. His whole body became a streak of gold light. He charged toward the sky crack without hesitation. A world-shaking roar exploded. The body of Kevin jammed itself into the space rift and held fast. Terrible turbulence scoured his back. Without mercy, flesh melted away under the wind and then grew back again. Kevin used his own body as the furnace. He burned the last of his chi and blood into the breach. He mended the broken void little by little. The heart-tearing cries of xianxia grew distant. The world in front of Kevin blurred at last. His awareness sank into endless darkness. A frightened scream cut through silence. Kevin snapped upright in bed and gulped air in huge ragged breaths. Cold sweat soaked his whole body. The sharp smell of disinfectant filled his nose. When he looked up, he did not see fallen god abyss. He saw a white ceiling and cold lights. Machines hummed. Beside the bed, a nurse rushed into the room and held him down. When he struggled, the attending doctor removed the stethoscope and spoke to him in fluent English. The doctor said Kevin suffered a severe car crash. The doctor said the head injury put him into a coma. The doctor said he had been unconscious for 3 years. Kevin sat frozen against the headboard. He turned and stared out the window. New York burned with bright night lights. Traffic roared below like a river of steel. The noise of the city replaced the bells of the sect. Everything looked real to a terrifying degree. It felt like that strange cultivation world, and those years of humiliation and hot blood revenge were only a dream that lasted 3 years. When Kevin tried to accept reality, and a sour emptiness rose in his chest. A burning pain suddenly stabbed into his palm. Kevin opened his right hand by instinct. His pupils tightened hard. In the sweat-soaked center of his palm was a dark red scar. The mark curled and twisted like living cloud. It was the flowing cloud totem of Qingyun Sect.